Great. Okay, so welcome everybody to today's episode of Multiple Myeloma Podcast, Patient Connect podcast. Excuse me. I'm excited to be joined by Theresa Burke, a fellow warrior, to talk about, a very important yet very misunderstood part of the cancer journey, which is clinical trials, and how clinical trials can open up new doors for patients, and the courage it takes to say yes and place trust in your medical team. So we'll dive into many questions that patients have, but they don't really get the chance to ask. And we'll explore how support groups like Warriors have played a role, and sort of fears that we can debunk here, about the experience. And at the end, we'll do some Q&A. And so this conversation is really part of our Polygon Health and Massive Bio partnership, working to make clinical trials more accessible for the myeloma community. So with that, Theresa, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll get started.
My name is Theresa Burke. I live in the Detroit, Michigan area. I've been a multiple myeloma patient since July 19 of 2017. I think everybody knows the date that they first learned. I was my original symptoms were leaning over in my car to pick up a reusable grocery sack, and I put my weight on my rib cage on the console, and I broke my ribs. So non-pathological fractures, I blew it off, broken ribs. I know that takes 6 to 8 weeks to heal. Didn't go to the doctor, tried to take care of it myself. Got on the motorcycle, drove from Michigan to Tennessee, rode around all Tennessee, rode all the way back. And I was in such pain, I called the doc up and I said, I can't take this. It's $150 for a copay for an emergency room visit. Will you help me out? She said, yeah, I'll tell them you're coming and you won't have to pay the $150. So that was at 3 o'clock on the afternoon when I was at work. And I'm one of these people, I never took off time for work. And I went to the ER, drove myself. And then by 9 o'clock that night, I was diagnosed with a cancer.
My goodness.
It was just totally out of the blue. And I had to call my mom up and say, hey, she lives in St. Louis, Missouri. And I say, hey, I got to let you know this. And she says, well, I don't mind what kind of cancer, so long as you don't have the same one that your Aunt Theresa had, her sister. And I said, oops, yeah, same cancer, multiple myeloma.
Got it. Got it.
My mom was scared to death that I was going to die like in 6 to 9 months, like my Aunt Theresa had done in 1985, and this was 2017. So in her mind, this was a death sentence. But what she didn't realize was that 35 years later, we had all these studies and all the money's invested into multiple myeloma, and it's not as much a death sentence anymore.
For sure.
And it wasn't at that time. So here I am, nearly 9 years later.
Excellent, excellent. And so what were your thoughts and feelings, upon first hearing it? How did your family as a support group and, other networks that you have to help support you, how did you sort of grow into sort of the next steps and the next phase?
The next phase is your induction phase, and then you just kind of have to do it. The doc says we're going to put you on these medications. You're going to have, every week, every 2 weeks. We're going to see how well you do. You go on the Revlimid, you get these, special machines. You have to answer all these questions. It's really a lot of do. Wait, right. Make an appointment, wait for the appointment, go to the appointment. They give you labs. You make an appointment for the labs, or you make an appointment for the imaging. You wait. It's what I call the treatment treadmill. Constantly on this, get your medication, recover, go to the doctor's office, repeat, rinse, lather, repeat,
Right,
so
right.
It's this treatment treadmill. And like everybody else, I got into the stem cell transplant like 5-6 months later, and that lasted 4.5 years. You get off of the stem cell transplant and you have to go on to different therapies, and that's when the treatment treadmill really began. And it was like just never got better. I worked part-time, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesdays. So I get my infusions on Thursdays. I had to spend my whole weekend recovering and then go back Monday to work. And I didn't have any time. I was so fatigued, and then repeat on Thursday morning again.
So it sounds like you were really on the ball, just sort of go, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, but you're exhausted during all that time.
Right.
Because the chemos are fatiguing, period. That's their number one side effect, is they're fatiguing, and you're sick.
So how were you getting your information, and where did you get your care? And maybe you could say a few words about that.
Am I allowed to talk brand names? And
oh yeah, sure.
Okay. I was being treated at the Corwell Corwell system in here in the Detroit, Michigan area. And my oncologist, I told him I had wanted to be in a study because I wanted to be at the cutting edge of the therapies. And he held out until a bispecific came into the Michigan area. And you were talking about access into clinical trials. My biggest complaint is that they don't have enough places for the clinical trials. For as rare as we are, there should be 20 different locations to run a clinical trial. And maybe that's logistically hard for the manufacturers. My
Hmm.
manufacturer is Pfizer because it's elransomab, but now it's been approved and called Elrexfio. But I don't have the wherewithal trying to work and be 55 years old and 10 years
Right.
from Medicare. And I had to work to keep my insurance to be able to drive someplace to get my therapy. As it is, I'm in a suburb of Detroit and I'm driving 45 miles to get the clinical trial stuff done. The logistics is what the clinical trials, in my opinion, needs to help
Logistics.
us out with. Um,
Got
that wasn't the original question. How did multiple myeloma, I mean, the groups help out tremendously. I found so many people who were going through similar. I found other people in the same trial. There's other people in the similar trial using the same drug, and we connected and we talked on it. We shared experiences, we shared side effects, and you didn't feel alone.
Right.
That was a
Right.
huge, huge help getting through all this. You don't feel alone.
Agreed, agreed. And I'm sure Alan's group in particular is made a big difference. Um, what what led to that inflection point of considering a clinical trial, right? Like where did you get to in your, first or second line treatments where, you said, what else is out there?
The treatment treadmill, there's got to be something better than living like this.
Mm,
Dose, recover, work, dose, recover, work. It's I had done it during the induction phase, and then you have the time off, and then you have to go back into therapy again the second time around, and the third time around, it's like you're just tired of it.
right,
You
right.
want a life. If you're going to be viable and working, you at least would like to be able to do mild hobbies and change your bed,
Sure.
clean your house.
Got it.
It's not like I was wanting to do hobbies that were risky or exerted a lot of energy. I'd really like to be able to ride my riding lawnmower and mow my lawn.
Simple. Yeah. And so did it come from you or did you express this to your doctor? How did the
Yeah, you have to
idea
be
come about?
willing to. I told my doctor I wanted part of the clinical trial because I had heard of the bispecific therapies through the support groups, and I
Got
went
it.
and researched them, and I said, "Hey, this science looks really, really good, and
Right.
I don't have to risk losing my job again, like the stem cell transplant made me lose my job because
Right.
the recovery was, 9 months to a year,
Hmm.
and they weren't going to keep me even on Family Medical Leave Act.
Mm,
I couldn't risk losing a job again and losing my insurance like I
of
had
course.
before."
Of
Because
course.
Cobra at $1,000 a month and a
Oh boy.
$300 a month copay
Yep.
for the Revlimid wasn't going to work, even no matter how many times I would save 6 months of emergency savings for it.
Makes
It
sense.
just wasn't going to work.
Agreed. Agreed. And so that's why don't you talk about the finances there for a second? What is the cost of this to you as somebody who's, trying
You
to keep
know,
your insurance and
in
yep,
clinical
okay.
trials,
Yeah.
I had been taught back in high school and early college, oh, clinical trials, they pay for everything. No, they don't.
Mm,
They only pay for the drug that they're supplying. So I get the drug Elrexfio for free,
right.
but what they call the standard of care medications, the medications that are like, well, your immune globulins go down and you have to get a supplemental infusion, and that's, $20,000 a dose. That comes from your insurance. So you have to go through the prior authorization point. The medicine for my previous GERD, my stomach
Right. Right.
medicines, that wasn't paid for. My high blood pressure medication isn't paid by Pfizer. Those are the things I thought that would all be covered by Pfizer.
Got it.
No, you still need insurance to cover those. You don't pay you for anything but their drug. And I thought, oh, they'll pay for the side effects of my drug. No,
Got it.
they don't.
So
So that's the money part of it.
did you get any help from anywhere else or
Yeah,
yeah,
I would take whatever copay assistance program because I was on commercial insurance.
right,
Fortunately, I wasn't on Medicare or Medicaid, and they consider any copay assistance program. What do they call that? An inducement, I think is the right word.
right.
One physician said at a seminar. Therefore, that's another word for bribe. I'm being plain in
Fair.
my language here. So that's one of the reasons that people on like a federal government system have such a hard time getting copay assistance. The
Got it.
government
And
used
how
to
did you
change
find out about that copay assistance?
through support groups like Multiple Myeloma Warriors.
Excellent. Excellent. Good.
Absolutely.
Good to hear
Yeah,
that. Yeah.
absolutely. The support groups are, you put a question out there and you're suddenly talking to, what is it, the crowd. And
Sure.
if everybody just pipes in and says, hey, talk to your doctor office about this, it's like you talk to the doctor's office. Oh, do you need help? Yeah, sure. We got tons of help.
Right, right. Perfect. Good to hear that. Okay, so going into the trial, sort of what was your biggest fear and how did you
Losing
work?
my job. Because when you go into a clinical trial, you don't know. I mean, bispecific antibodies have that step up program where you have to get a dose. I'm just going to use fake numbers, 20 milligrams, then 50 milligrams, then 100 milligrams, then your full dose. And you don't know if you're going to come down with the cytokine release storm or the
Right.
ICANS. And if that did, then I was going to get really sick and I could be out of work for a month to 2 months, and there goes my job again. But the risk was well worth it because if I didn't have it,
Hmm.
unlike a CAR T, which is, 3 months out of a job, I knew I'd lose my job. This was so much better. I just was, oh, if everything went well, it was only going to be a week to 2 weeks off work, and I could handle that financially.
Got it. Very good. Um, and so what do you wish patients knew more about clinical trials now that you've gone through the process?
The money part, the joy, the relief of being at the cutting edge technology, that the side effects are, although they are there, most people are pretty rare. In the bispecifics, 90% of the people are well, and only 10% of the people have side effects. And now they've got the side effects pretty much under control with the treatments of, they call it TOSI, I think.
Hmm.
And so they're getting that kind of control. I want them to be aware, the finances in terms of what is paid for and what is not. I want them to be aware that somebody absolutely takes care of your scheduling, your labs, all of that. That's so nice. I never had to plan. I just had to call them and remind them, hey, am I due for a dose? And what do you have to do? Oh, yeah, we've got you scheduled for this. It was a piece of cake. In the healthcare system that I'm getting this trial through, Henry Ford Health System here in Detroit, they have a clinical trials office, and I have a dedicated person, like a navigator, who's planning all this out for me. And she's terrific. Her name is Kristen, and kudos to Kristen.
Way to shout out Kristen. Okay. And so that brings up a point about where you got treated. Did you go to sort of Henry Ford from the beginning, or like
No, no, I
you
was
go to the local hospital? How did you escalate?
I started out, sick in the hospital, and then they referred me to an office clinic, and I
Yeah.
was getting care at the office clinic, and through the multiple myeloma specialist at that office, and he's the one who, when I told him, I said I was ready for a clinical trial and I wanted to do CAR T, he says, no, 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 you want a bite, and I said, oh, what's that? And so I went and researched, and I said, yeah, that's what I want. He says, okay, and he kept his ear out into the ground, and he found out that they were running a trial there at another healthcare system. He says, I hate to lose you as a patient, but you need to go here.
Perfect.
And
Perfect.
he did that, and that was so good. I have yet to call him and let him know how well I'm doing, so I need to go back and do that.
Absolutely. Maybe you can say his name and you could send him
Oh, well, Dr.
video.
Yusuf Kwasmaranian.
Perfect.
It means it
At
means trees on the mountain.
at which hospital is he?
He was at Hematology Oncology Consultants at the Corwell Royal Oak campus in Royal Oak, Michigan.
Got it. But you received the clinical trial at Henry Ford.
At Henry Ford, yeah, Henry Ford has many branches too, but Henry Ford Harris Cancer Center in downtown Detroit.
Got it. And now you're at
No,
Cornwell?
now I'm here with Henry Ford
You're back. Okay.
permanently.
You're
I
with
finished my trial, but I'm still sticking with the it's it's not a it's an academic office
right.
that's taking care of me now because I went from the 2 year clinical trial to now I'm in the what they call Pfizer's maintenance trial to 3 years because my trial was from May of 2023 until May of 2025. I finished that, and here it is October, and I'm been re-enrolled in a it was called Magnetism 9, and now I'm in Magnetism number 15. It's a where all of us who did well In the early magnetism trials, we are now being transferred to, and I'm getting the drug at compassionate use because my insurance company will not cover it. They wanted me to use a different bispecific, and I wasn't
Got
going
it.
to go through all that.
Got it. Okay. So this is very recent and ongoing, seems like.
Yes, sir.
And so, in terms of your status, how do they define your status? Um,
I've had 2 years of minimum residual disease, bone marrow biopsy. They're considering me minimum residual disease under control, but not having achieved a remission because nobody in multiple myeloma achieves remission. I have to stay on the drug for life. That's
which
what they're thinking.
which drug is this now?
Elrexfio is
Okay.
the brand name. It's
Okay.
easier to pronounce.
From Pfizer, you said.
Yes, from Pfizer. It's a bispecific antibody with a BCMA receptor.
Got it. Okay, very good. I think
And
that,
again, I
yeah.
couldn't do the CAR T. I wanted to do the CAR T. I would have done the CAR T 8 years ago, but it wasn't offered to me.
Ah,
But because it's supposed to be a once and done.
right.
But at the time I was finally able to even consider it, that now had the 3 month, 6 month recovery, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. The
So
bispecific recovery is only 1 to 2 weeks, and then you're
interesting.
you're back into because you're back into a once a week for 6 weeks, once every 2 weeks to the 6 month mark, the once a month for the 1 year mark, and then every 8 weeks for the 2 year mark.
Well, that's an interesting point you bring up because if you had access to the CAR T clinical trial those years ago, you're saying you would have taken that at that time.
Yes,
And we
because
don't know if it would have
bispecifics
worked
went
for
out.
you or not. It might have worked for you, might not have worked for you.
Right. But
Um,
you
it was
take
an option.
patients. Yeah, if it was an option, I would have jumped at the chance that back then. You bet.
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, at the time, it wasn't offered in my area, and I
Right.
could not travel or have any support because
Got
I
it.
live alone
Got it.
to, I would have had no caregiver. My
Yep.
my kinfolk live away from Detroit, Michigan area,
Got it. Got it.
and there would have been nobody there for me.
Okay. This was very eye-opening. Thanks, Teresa. So with that, I want to, um, everybody, you can prepare some questions, Donna, um, Cheryl, whoever else is on. But I want to ask Fiona maybe to say some words based on what you've heard, Fiona. Fiona is from Massive Bio. They really walk folks through the clinical trial process. Our role at Polygon Health is really to bring awareness and, qualify people in a way that gets them. And then, Fiona and her company really sort of take them through sort of the step by step. So, Fiona, maybe you want to add some words based on Teresa's story?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And Teresa, you do have an amazing story. And thank you for sharing it. It's really unbelievable how many lives, you can change by sharing your story. So I thank you. And thank you for participating in a clinical trial. I think there's a lot of misconception out there regarding clinical trials. And every time we have this kind of sharing, it helps. Um,
Yes.
yeah. So at Massive Bio, I'm sorry that you had to go through all these hurdles. Um, you are right that, clinical trials cover the cost of the clinical trial drug, but anything else, goes through patient's local insurance, which, can be uh, shocking if you're not
Right.
aware.
Right.
Um, but yeah, here at Massive Bio, what we do is, we screen patients for clinical trials. So we have created our own artificial intelligence-based technology that pulls all the data from clinicaltrials.gov, and then our clinical team goes through their process of screening and matching those our patients to the available clinical trials. And at the end of their matching process, they will share a list or a report of clinical trials that that patient is eligible for.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great
With this,
tool.
is this initiated by the patient to your company? It says, "Hey, what clinical trials would I be eligible for?" It's the patient.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we also have partnerships with Polygon Health, Um, and, we work with physicians directly. So they'll say, hey, these are my patients, screen all of them and tell me what they're eligible for. Or
Cool.
they say, hey, reach out to this patient. They would be a good candidate for a clinical trial. So we do the screening. We have what we call patient relation coordinators that connect with patients, collect their information, give them a little bit of education about clinical trials. For example,
Mhm.
the cost, um, you know, discussion. They let them know that, hey, while the drug is covered, the other stuff will go through your local insurance.
Right, right. And
Um,
there's no coverage for driving. There's no coverage for an overnight stay at the hotel.
yeah,
And so
well,
that has to be part of it. And I
it
know that
is.
I'm
It
fortunate
is.
that I live in the suburbs of Detroit, Michigan, but I got friends in the Ann Arbor local community. They live, 2 hours north in northern Michigan. And it's just, they would have to drive 2.5 hours.
Yeah. Well, we have some exciting news about that too. Massive, when we do our search for trials, we try to search in the patient's preferred travel area. But of
Right,
course, we don't know what trials are going to be in that area, right? Until
right.
we do the search. So if we do identify a trial for a patient and it's far away,
Hmm.
if we have a relationship with the sponsor in any way, we can oftentimes help with lodging, travel, meals.
That's great. And it's
No.
great to have somebody offer that.
Yeah.
Yeah, obviously, there's a mile limit, I'm sure. I'm 40 miles away from my center, and that was just too close. It was only an hour drive one way each. But
Yeah.
again, because now that it's every 8 weeks, no big deal.
Right. But if it's 3 times a week or
It
more
was,
than that,
yep,
it's a challenge. It is.
it is.
Um,
And who can
yeah.
afford it?
Yeah.
Right.
So we try to help where we can, for those patients. But we also recently partnered with the American Cancer Society, and we have this kind of wraparound service with them. So they don't offer any kind of clinical trial help, or they
Right.
hadn't until recently. But now they have selected us as their clinical trial matching vendor.
Excellent.
So, patients come to the American Cancer Society. Um, if they're interested in trials, they're directed to us. And then
Terrific.
when we identify the trial, we also assess that patient for any kind of needs,
That's
travel,
terrific.
lodging, all of those things. And then we connect them back to the American Cancer Society so they can help with all of those, problems, because they are
I
problems.
locally, our American Cancer Society has a ride thing. You can sign up
Yeah,
for a ride,
absolutely.
so long as you can do it on a phone. Now, my mom's 85 years old, and most of the
Yeah,
multiple myeloma patients are 65, 75, 85. They're
right.
not being able to use a phone for texting and everything. I wish there was sometimes more for folks like my mom who are not tech savvy,
Yeah,
especially when you're trying to get well and you're not in a learning part of your brain. I remember
right,
that so
exactly.
well.
Yeah, it definitely is challenging, and there are some gaps
Right.
that we still need to kind of work through. But I think I know, one of the benefits of going through Massive Bio, first, we don't charge any fees. So our service is free. We never charge any fees to any patients. And we will try to assist you through all of those things. So you have a dedicated patient relation coordinator, who helps you on board so that we get all your information. We collect your medical records for you so that we can do our screening, or our clinical team can do their screening effectively. And then you are assigned a case manager who's either a
That's
nurse.
awesome.
Yeah, they're either a nurse or a physician. So
You hire a pharmacist?
we don't have any pharmacists and we don't hire them. Yeah. That could be in the future though. You never know. But yeah, we try, because we understand here at Massive Bio that finding a trial is only one part of the hurdle, right?
Yes, yes.
Then you have all the operational issues, and just some basic education, things that you wouldn't, why would you know about a clinical trial? You wouldn't, because
No,
it's nowhere in your radar.
right.
So we try to offer, as much support as we can. Patients come to us. Some of them know, some of them are educated like you. Now you've been through it. You clearly have a lot of knowledge. Some patients just probably like you when you started, no idea, no
Right.
clue.
No clue.
So
I
yeah,
want and those are the people that I feel that I feel that we need to help. We as a
absolutely.
community, the warrior community needs to come together and help each other because that's what we're here for.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I want to get to some questions that are in the chat. Tammy asks, am I correct to assume most patients seek a clinical trial as a result of relapse or being proactive with treatment? Teresa?
I did a little of both. Like I said, I wanted to be in a clinical trial early on before, when I was just getting what they called the triplet therapy in 2017, 2018. They said, oh, no, you would never qualify. We only do that for people who are later stage. And I'm like, okay, that was all, and put it to rest. And then I got tired with the treatment treadmill. And that's what led me to even start bringing it up again with my oncologist. Hey, look, this is too much. I want a real life. And that's what brought me to further asking. And that was at like the 4.5, 5 year mark of my journey.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
both.
It can be both. Yeah, clinical trials can be an option, for first line of treatment for some cancer types. It
Right.
really depends on your cancer type but I
And your
would say
insurance, because
and your yeah.
my insurance was going to say, and if I remember my insurance correctly, well, we want to put you through standard of care before you go to a clinical trial. And I'm like, yeah, but standard of care is, 20 years old and the clinical trials are brand new and they're having great success. So you still have that balance.
Well, yeah, there can be some of that, but I most recently, as long as the trial site where the trial is where you would be attending the trial participates with the insurance, because there is some standard of care treatment involved in a trial, most insurances are pretty open to clinical trials
That's
at this
terrific.
point.
That's
Yeah,
terrific. Yeah, that's changed in the last 8 years.
it
That's
has.
good.
It
That's
has.
that's fantastic to learn. It's
Yeah.
probably due to people like you and a news and to go to these companies and say, hey, this
Right.
is what we're hearing from
Right.
patients need.
Yeah,
Good.
absolutely.
Another question from Wei Lin. You mentioned you proactively went to your doctor to explore clinical trials. Did your doctor give you some other option before you actually did the clinical trial, or was it straight to
No, he was kind of doing the cookbook thing,
got it?
First relapse, your first set of therapies, the triplet, then you have the stem cell transplant, and then, we have this one for when you relapse 4.5 years later. And no, he was just going the step by step, and after that had not worked or, and it was working, it just wasn't a good lifestyle.
Sure, makes sense. So did your doctor pick out the best trial for you, or how did
I told him,
navigate that?
I approached him, I says, this treatment treadmill, coming back every week, coming back every 2 weeks and trying to have a life in between, it's just too tough. Only 57, no, 58 years old at the time. And it just
Right.
wasn't going
But
to
did
work
he
for
did
me.
he give you one trial or several trials to choose from?
One trial, because we had discussed, I want it to be part, even at that point, at the 4.5 year mark, I wanted CAR T. And he said, no, you got to wait for the bites to be available because he
Got it.
liked the bite therapy better.
Uh,
And I said, well, I would be willing, after I researched bites, I said, sure, I'd be willing to do that. But it'd be even better because then I wouldn't lose my job. And so
Perfect.
that's where, so he and I went back and forth on that. And that's what it should be, back and forth.
Good, good. All right, we are at the top of the hour. So this is fantastic. Teresa, thank you so much. We have somebody else in the chat who says they start a clinical trial in 2 weeks. So
Yay.
there
Yay.
you
Well
go.
done. Thank
Good.
you for doing that.
Have courage, know that this will end, know that this is going to be something you can do.
Right.
This is completely doable, and live into the cure because we're not far from it.
Love that. Was going to ask you for some parting words, but you gave them already. So thank you so much, Teresa, and everybody else on the call. There is a link in the chat for folks to, if you have any interest whatsoever in clinical trials, Fiona and her team will guide you through your options. So you can click on that link and submit your name. And that's all for now. And stay tuned for more in this series of clinical trial stories. Thank you so much, Teresa.
You're welcome. Have a blessed
Thank you,
day.
Bye,
Teresa.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.